I'm Nicole Shanahan, Bobby Kennedy's running mate. Welcome to Back to the People podcast, which highlights the growth of a movement uniting America, where our government is free from corporate capture and where we give voice back to the American public. Why do we keep these agencies separate when we think about climate and the USDA?
So if we can really let people understand the cycles around us, that's what nature is about.
And regenerative farming is truly one of the only efforts we can do in climate that really doesn't have a downside. It's all upside.
And if we had whole foods with good nutrient density, healthy soil, healthy air, our cancer rates would drop.
What I've realized is my work in agriculture and my work in women's health has overlapped.
Nutrient-dense food creates healthy, thriving creatures.
Eddy, thanks for sitting down with me today. I've been following your work, and before they started rolling, I feel like we already dropped in on Ina.
Oh, okay, Ina, yeah, our land, our earth, what we come from and what we're supposed to give back to. Hearing that you are so into regenerative agriculture and knowing how Mr. Kennedy is into taking care of the land for us in Hawaii, I think that speaks really loudly. We're such a culture that comes from the land and depends on it for sustainability and subsistence, that we kind of have to look that our rivers are clean and that our Ina is clean, and it's so important. So I don't know, I think it's pretty cool that you guys are coming at it from this angle of actually caring about our Ina.
Yeah.
So, really important.
I learned yesterday this term, ho'oma'e, to kind of put back, to keep clean, and I was thinking about that with reference to what is so natural to the Hawaiian ethos, Ina and ho'oma'e. It strikes me that what is obvious here, to Hawaiians and to those close to the land, is something that ought to be obvious to all of us. I've read your background, and you've had such a hero's journey to this moment. How would you define your relationship with Ina and your journey to this moment?
To define my journey with the Ina and to where I'm at right now, I would say a lot of trial and error, a lot of humility, a lot of learning from my mistakes. But to have a dirt under my fingernails most of the time you see me, and realizing that as a child, I was able to grow food from a really early age. I looked at the old people that were 80 and 90 years old, and what were they doing? They were working in their gardens. Mm-hmm. So I thought, wow, I might be able to skip a few places in line if I start working in my garden now. So I started to realize the importance of earthworms and all the creatures that are around us. A bird that poops in that tree, it's the most beautiful tree because it's fertilizing it. Yeah. So sort of trying to tap into the journey of what's happening around me.
Yeah.
So I often use the trio of observation, patience, and consistency. Mm-hmm. And so what I've been doing through my journey is trying to consistently observe what's happening around me, and then consistently put some practices into place. The leaves are falling underneath a tree, and now there's earthworms underneath that tree. If I look at a forest, it doesn't have to feed itself. It takes care of itself. But if I look at giant monoculture agriculture, like for what we grew up with, a terrible legacy all around us, which was sugarcane and pineapple. And they brought in the worst chemicals, and they did deep tilling. And then instead of the land being something that we honored and we took from and gave back to, now it was only a monetary equivalent. Mm-hmm. So now they were able to till it deep, strip all the life out of it, and simply put chemical fertilizer in to grow food only for money, instead of growing land for people, instead of growing Ina and growing ourselves and our relationship to the land. Mm-hmm. It's pretty, sorry if they're two long-winded answers for that.
No, keep going. It's beautiful.
I've watched this journey unfold around me, being in these remote places like Molokai and living really close, catching my food from the ocean and growing my food and being able to share with people some of the amazing things that we're able to grow, which we're going to share a few things we brought over here
I'm so
and turn you on to some different stuff.
Yeah.
But watching like the amazement of like people when they pull a carrot out of the ground for the first time, or they realize that a peanut grows underground.
Yeah.
As a kid, I was like, wow, that's really cool to be able to share that with people and to show them that. So there's a wealth that comes along with that. The more you learn, the more of that knowledge you gain, the more you observe what's happening, the closer your relationship to the land comes. And so at the same time, cell phones came into existence and technology was taking this giant leap forward. Let's talk before I was born. For the last 200 years, we've been walking away from nature towards technology. I finally think for the first time ever, we have the chance to walk back to nature with technology. Take all the good that technology has to offer, clean our rivers, clean our lands, build soil. And I think building that relationship back to the Aina will make humankind stronger. Not only humankind, but what do we displace? What's our footprint displaced behind us? We displace all the wild animals, the bees, so we can grow something that's a monetary equivalent. So if we can come to the place where we can look at the land and go, the wealth is way more than monetary. It's for our great-grandchildren. 100 years ago, I think 90% of people were farming. Now it's less than 3%.
Wow.
Most of the farming is giant corporations, so it's been taken from us. No more of grandma growing her own apple pie and being proud of it, because like people were taught that farming is, I'm not exactly sure what happened. Something in the Industrial Revolution sort of changed our understanding of how we should interact and treat nature. So instead, we leave this heavy footprint, we displace everything around us, and we justify the monetary gain off of it. So personally, I think that it will do us no harm to start to rebuild our relationship with nature and to like understand the value and the wealth of it that's coming.
Yeah. Do we work backwards? So do we start with the fruit and then figure out where the fruit came from and look up the vine and figure out what feeds the vine and go into the soil and understand what feeds the soil? I'm asking because I think a lot of people do feel disconnected and they would love to feel more connected. There's this mass loneliness pandemic. There's this mass sense of spiritual vapidness. There's this vast sense of feeling like not even aware of how disconnected we've become. How about we look at the fruit, and we can talk about, maybe giving people hints.
Yeah, of what it's like.
On how to come back.
To look beyond the surface.
Yeah.
To sort of see like what we've been missing. I'm the lucky guy who looks under rocks and finds things, and I've just been curious since I was a child.
Yeah.
But it's led to my relationship with nature.
Yeah.
And being able to see it and be able to hear it, taste it, touch it, smell it. And I feel wealthy beyond what my words would do any justice for that. And so for me, my journey is to share that with others.
Yeah.
I sort of help reconnect people back to that wealth. In a sense. And part of it is like something as simple as this. Let's start off with a few things we got down the road.
I can hold that.
From a regenerative farm stand.
Okay.
And let's use this as a good little example right here.
I don't think I've seen this
one.
So
this is turmeric. This is black turmeric.
This is black turmeric. I've only seen the orange kind.
Right. There's yellow, there's orange, there's white. There's all these different types. And here in Hawaii, we have a native turmeric. It's called Pua Olena. And it's really important. It was used in a lot of lapa'au, which is Hawaiian medicine back in the day. I was fortunate enough to be around some of those old timers and have studied a little bit with them. So I'm super blessed that way. This is another type of turmeric from another place in the world, but we have such an incredible climate here. We can grow things that wouldn't grow in other places. Now look at that.
It's got blues. It looks like ginger at first when you cut into it, but then when you look closely, you realize it's not ginger.
Right, it's a turmeric, and this is almost too strong to eat just like you would the orange turmeric. But the active ingredient, which is called curcumin, which is for anti-inflammatory, in the orange and the yellow turmeric, that's much more, it's easier to eat. This has 10 times the amount of it in there.
No way.
So this has to be used in little doses of it. But just experiencing the beauty of like what we don't see that's around us all the time. Let me pick something else up here. This is called chocolate sapote. And if we cut this open, why is it called a chocolate sapote?
Wow.
You can kind of see. So I grab these things to take back to Maui for seed. You can just taste that right there, and let's see what her expression does on that. It's very interesting.
It's pretty yummy. It's like the texture of fudge.
Yeah, it's almost like avocado and honey or something with chocolate mixed into it.
It's really good.
So, Mame sapote, we'll take these seeds back to our farm on Maui. We grew a lot of black turmeric, which all burned in the Lahaina fires at our farm. We'll talk about that in a little while. But so you have that here on the ground. We also have what's called canistel. And this is a lot like a little starchy thing.
Wow.
There's so many different fruits and stuff that grow here.
The seed
and you guys around, feel free to jump right in this and try this as well, because it's pretty amazing.
Wow. I
thought
I knew the Hawaiian fruits, but I have literally never seen these.
So the Hawaiian fruits, not necessarily, but because we have such a dynamic climate here, we can grow everything from all over the world here.
Oh, that's right.
So as far as fruits, we were really limited. Which means, well, why the Hawaiians were so connected to the Aina and what's going on. If you can imagine leaving your island thousands of miles away, what are you going to take with you? So all of the voyagers in the South Pacific, they had about 27 different plants they would carry, and they would seed all the different islands with them for future generations. They would never be back there in their lifetime, but when future generations came, those seeds were planted there. It's kind of like what you and Mr. Kennedy are doing right now, in a sense. You're planting seeds for the future that way.
I do think that there is definitely something to be said of, you know, these are literal seeds, but the work, the effort, the act of participating in Aina is in and of itself a form of seeding. And definitely I would say, you know, Bobby has worked so hard and continues to work so hard. And Hawaii has been just a wonderful partner for this campaign as well. And you know, we were just talking about the fact that Hawaii was one of the first states that we were able to get on the ballot, and it's the first state to defend a ballot challenge from one of the other parties. So certainly. So in terms of what you do in Maui today, what has been the biggest change you've seen happening in Maui or Hawaii since you started this work?
Oh, so since I started this work, the changes would be impossible to even share with you in less than 12 hours. We've lost all of our beaches to industry giant hotels. We've been made second-class citizens by the tourism industry rather than promoting sustainable agriculture. We've been made to serve rather than invite as equal guests. So in a lot of ways, if you look at the atrocities that have happened here in Hawaii, from the illegal overthrow to the giant industry of the sugarcane and the pineapple that's like deforested our islands and left it rampant with invasive species. And just, I mean, you could just go down the line from modern day times to the tragedy of the fire in Lahaina. And instead of like treating the toxic material the right way, just stuffing it anywhere in a hole the cheapest way possible. So just to give you an overview, there's a lot of issues here in Hawaii. And everyone just considers it a destination rather than the Kingdom of Hawaii. And I think that if people came here with the reverence and the respect to learn the culture and to sort of understand the people and why everyone feels so close to the Aina, why it's important to have clean streams, clean water, clean ocean that we eat out of, and to protect our resources. Yeah, that's a tough question because there's so many issues. And I'm sure just the same way on the American mainland and everything that happens, you know?
Yeah, most definitely. You know, most recently, the states have been trying to preempt individuals from suing for injury from glyphosate, which would be so disastrous, because truly our legal system has been the only way for us to protect ourselves from the devastation inflicted by these corporations that are so singularly focused on producing the maximum amount of saleable crops. And those crops, we're learning, are void of real vitamins and minerals, which are foundational to human health. So not only are we ingesting residual pesticides, but we're consuming foods that no longer nourish us. And that word nourish us, right? No longer connected to INA. So when we disconnect from INA, I think the real life repercussion is something that we're seeing across the board. And rather than acknowledging it, it seems that there's a systematic effort to even prevent us from using our legal system to protect ourselves. And so, as we look at what's going on in Maui, which is really emblematic of what's going on across the United States, and the preciousness here, because people are still connected to INA, is very much, makes Hawaii, I think, a place that is going to be the nucleus of this fight in every single way. And so as you're fighting every day. I mean, you are so impressive, and part of the way you fight is to grow, and to grow the way we're supposed to grow when we're in relationship with INA.
I think that if we set an example, and we show instead of say, and we do instead of say, then that's the only way we can walk forward to the future, with examples that are set and that show it's possible. I have people come to me all the time. I take on these big projects. I take a valley that's been decimated with trash and invasive trees, and I show them what 3 years looks like. They think it's 25 years. They think it's gonna take us 20 years to clean this up. No, it's not. We have the knowledge, we have the power nowadays to right these wrongs. And with very minimal amounts of money and time and input, we can change and regenerate and leave a better future for our children. So for me personally, I look at the giant corporations like Monsanto, for instance. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on the thing or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Bobby's campaign says, let's put it all out there.
So on Molokai, I was right next to one of Monsanto's largest operations. In fact, I think they make a huge percentage of all the seed corn in the world is made behind closed doors on Molokai.
Wow.
I had bees right next to them, so I was collecting the pollen and having it tested. And rather than fight with the workers at Monsanto, I grew the most amazing farm with no fertilizers. We have some of the most nutrient-dense food recorded from our tests. We have some of the highest yields. We use no fertilizers, no pesticides. But if people don't see those examples where they can taste them, touch them, smell them, and be a part of it, then they don't know it exists.
You make a really good point. I was chatting with a woman who's fighting against glyphosate use. And the reason why glyphosate is used in such large quantities today is because the weeds become more and more resistant. So you need to use more and more of it. And the way that we've been thinking about approaching it now, because the farmers are like, why are you taking away my glyphosate? I need more glyphosate, because that's the only way I'm going to be able to clear this field and get it ready for planting.
The only way they're going to be able to profit clearing that field, not using labor. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but sorry.
Yeah, but exactly. And if the price of glyphosate is going up, their profits go down too. So the response that I think that is the only response that is going to get us through this absolutely ridiculous time in history is to say, let us show you. We will show you by example how to clear those weeds and prevent them from growing back.
Yep.
It is the most powerful
So it's funny that you say
way
this.
to fight.
One of my hugest things that I've been against for many years here, and I can directly, almost in a way, take credit for it. And that's not what I'm looking for. But I realized that our highways have been being sprayed with Roundup for the last 20 years. Everybody around me didn't seem to know. So I started pointing it out to key players and saying, hey, that's Roundup. Hey, you see how it's green right next to it? That's glyphosate. So you're spraying that there, and why is the highway doing it? Shouldn't they be hiring people in the community? You get more jobs, and you get clean rivers. And then we already knew years ago that glyphosate had been linked to cancers. It was held up in litigation for, I want to say, almost 30 years. So I've been leaking that to the public on Molokai and here on Maui
Well, they've
for
actually,
many years.
Bayer now has had to pay out billions of dollars due to injury.
That's right.
And so they're trying to figure out how to get around it. But it seems like, yes, we can fight these things in court, but the absolute only solution is what you're doing, which is showing people that we don't have to spray, and that the result is in the benefit of literally everyone. My friend was telling me the other day, her and I get into a debate. She's a former Harvard MBA, very smart, and we were debating, science over nature. And she was like, well, yeah, there's always a downside to everything, but you just have to absorb it. And I was like, no, there's not a downside to many things related to nature. And regenerative farming is truly one of the only efforts we can do in climate that really doesn't have a downside. It's all upside.
I 100% agree. So I want to get into a point like with the Roundup, when I was saying that I've taken that on for a long time, tried to keep it off the highways and whatnot. Yeah, I didn't fight that fight publicly. I put it into other people's hands and let them fight it. While at the same time on my farm, I was showing people how I don't use any glyphosate, and I actually have a way where the toughest grass in the world you can pull out like butter. If you treat it right and you reestablish the soil biome, these plants won't search for food with deep tap roots. And we have an example. We show people every single weekend on my farm. We show them areas that we set up where people would have been using glyphosate, and then we put the wood chips on it, and then we go through there 2 weeks later and we pull it out like butter. And we show people that you do it one time, you don't have to deal with it later. And the key is educating them to the seed cycle. So if you weed it and it's got seeds on it, you just drop more. So if we can really let people understand the cycles around us, that's what nature is about. It's about these cycles. So if a bug lays eggs, 23 days later, this bug hatches out. If I really want to interrupt this bug, I'll interrupt that cycle and do something natural by pulling those plants in between there. The weeds and pulling the weeds is not that different. If I want to manage this lawn, and instead of using Roundup to spray the weeds in it, which I doubt this person does, but I would actually target the plants in between it, knowing their seed cycle. And I'd cut them every time and let them feed the land instead of being part of the problem. So like these cycles exist all around us in nature. It's perfection. We just have to learn to catch up to speed with it and pay enough attention to it that it's like a common knowledge. It's like almost like our common sense. We have to pay for it with attention. So if we pay enough attention to it, we're gonna be able to gain this wealth from paying for it. But what we pay for is our attention.
Very fascinating framing of that, and it makes me think of all of the boardrooms I've been in Silicon Valley that are monetizing attention, and on social media platforms predominantly, but on internet platforms, because the longer you pay attention, the more money those platforms make.
Interesting.
And it was something that, I realized about 10 years ago, that we were in this monetization of the attention economy, but that was serving the corporations. So it was the corporations who were monetizing it. As you use that term, paying in our attention to nature.
We're inicizing it.
We're inicizing it, but who gets paid? We get paid.
Right.
Our health and ourselves get paid. Our friends and our community get paid.
Our grandchildren get paid.
Our
future generations. Right now, we're stealing land that's not ours. We're supposed to have stewardship on this planet. And when we take care of it, it takes care of us. And if we had whole foods with good nutrient density, healthy soil, healthy air, our cancer rates would drop through the roof. Plummet. You look at what's happening.
I've often said we need to look at policy from that perspective, that why do we keep these agencies separate when we think about climate and the USDA? Like, if we actually combined our climate spend on agriculture, we would every single time go into healthy soil practices because, and Kiss the Ground and Common Ground did a good job explaining this, but life, our climate crisis, as it's described by the current administration, is really about just dead carbon in the wrong places in our atmosphere. But the work you do takes that carbon and turns it into life.
Yeah, the building blocks of life.
Right.
I think we're 18% carbon. So if we consider that carbon constantly recycled within the cycles of this round circular economy of our planet, a nature's circular economy, leaves fall from the tree, the earthworm eats them into the ground. That's carbon it took from the sky, it's putting that carbon into the ground. We later on pull all that carbon out, burn it in cars, do whatever we do with it. And like finding that balance again in that cycle, I think it's really important. So like sequestering carbon and working towards what we can, like you say, this dirty carbon's everywhere in places it shouldn't be, and it's not rocket science. It's about reforestation.
And it's the laws of nature. It's just how nature works. And rather than trying to over-engineer and control it mechanistically, we can actually be in relationship with it from a place of spirit, right? At the end of the day, it comes from this desire to connect and to feel human and to feel truly alive. Do you feel in your journey that there's an aliveness to how you spend your day? If you were to sit next to somebody who was on their computer 8 to 10 hours a day, do you think you just buzz more energy and more like life or connection or happiness? Like, do you,
it's hard to say. People refer to me as the Energizer Bunny.
Yeah, okay,
I'm
there
well
you go.
into my 50s.
Yeah.
I'm still surfing harder than most of the young guys I know.
Nice.
I actually got to surf the Pipeline Shootout this year.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I was probably the oldest guy there and no one even knew it.
No way.
Yeah, so like energy, I do attribute an amazing energy factor that I have. I only sleep a few hours a night, and not in a negative way, but I constantly am going. And if it's possible that my relationship to nature, running around barefoot, having little cuts on my fingers and dirt under my fingernails, they talk about kids being able to play on the ground and they have a stronger gut biome. I rarely get sick in any way, shape, or form. I've been through major accidents and I'm whole, for the most part. To say that at my age. So
well, I am surfing Pipeline regularly.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna put myself on a pedestal and say I buzz more than someone that's been on the computer all the time, but I do have an abundance of energy. I do have a super healthy immune system.
Yeah.
And I feel wealthy beyond what money could even touch. And so my scale of I feel abundance all around me. And I feel like being able to go somewhere and recognize it, there's a gift in that. Yeah. And like being able to see what's under the tree or what's under the rock and have some understanding of what we're a part of. Yeah. I think everybody should experience that. And I think there is a wealth of having that knowledge and that abundance from paying that attention. I've paid attention for many years and I've really banked on that. And I think being able to give that to this circular economy rather than an economy of what everybody thinks,
well,
this consumerism.
Yeah. It doesn't come back.
There's something positive. You plant a seed. Even if you're not there to see it, future generations will see it. So I do think there's I feel, I don't even know the words I would use to have the relationship that I have. But right now, at this point in my life, I feel the need to share it with others because I see so many people that are just lost and don't have this relationship. And even just giving folks around me the tiniest little tidbit of it, I see it. I see it every single day.
Yeah. Like
for instance, in Lahaina right now, if I'm not interrupting a train of thought.
Please.
So we just went through these devastating fires in Lahaina. And a lot of why these fires occurred was no one was paying attention to nature. All around Lahaina, overgrown, untaken care of fallow land. People spraying Roundup in areas instead of actually cleaning stuff up. Landowners that were more worried about money for selling the land than any agriculture. So most of our agricultural lands have been bought up by really wealthy people, and then they become gentlemen's estates. Those people still pay agricultural taxes because they have like 20 lemon trees in their yard. So they don't even put those taxes back into our community, rather than allowing the ag land to have farmers on it. And then farmers that are gonna make the land better for the future, not just look at it as this economical thing.
Yeah.
So like looking at small farms and homesteading and being self-sufficient and having this mindset of how America used to be 100 years ago. That's what made America, in my opinion, is being able to be self-sufficient and strong like this. Yeah. And the Hawaiians are like a great example out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean of like their resilience and their sustainable practices for thousands of years in relevance to that.
So I work with a woman who teaches regenerative agriculture at Chico State in California. She's leading the entire natural agricultural climate resiliency effort in our state. And she was telling me a few months ago that the state was going to cut off water rights to about 1 million acres of farmland, and that they were going to let it go fallow. And they didn't have a way to decide which farms they were going to cut off, and it almost seemed arbitrary based on the existing water infrastructure. And the idea was to, conserve water. And her expression to me was of great concern and fear. She was like, you can't just let this land go fallow. Secondarily, we can't cut off water to lots that have regenerative potential, because that would be a real loss. And then finally, the farmers need to have a say, and they can't just be the corporate interest farmers. They have to be the farmers that are actually deeply connected to the land, working with it, and understand the dynamics, and understand that water access to these lots is actually in the best interest of everybody in the community. What has your experience been with water rights in Maui? You had mentioned earlier some of these lots which are zoned for agriculture are not actually being used for agriculture. But would love to hear your journey with water.
So in Lahaina on the west side of Maui, all of Maui, for many years, there were ditches cut through the mountains, and all the water from our streams has been taken to central areas and used by the sugarcane industry and the pineapple industry. This water was vital to the Kanaka, the Hawaiians, Kanaka Maoli, and to the Kingdom of Hawaii. Everything was based upon the water. The word for wealth in Hawaiian is ho'ovaivai.
Ho'ovaivai.
Vai. The word for water, W-A-I, vai.
Vai.
The word for heart, pu'uvai. So the hill of the water, in a sense. So, and we have been so left in the dust and all of the water resources taken. You hear about Lahaina burning. Lahaina was once called the Venice of the Pacific because there's natural aquifers that come down from the mountain. What happened was the sugarcane industry deterred them and bypassed them and took them to where they wanted. So they dried up all this land. So now Lahaina is this dry desert with no water in it, and all of the fallow land around it where it wasn't supposed to have water, where they planted sugarcane, and then they left. They abandoned all the land, and they sold it to developers. So developers took this thousands of acres of land that the pineapple industry didn't actually own and the sugarcane didn't own. They leased it, and then they took their leases, and then they did what's called adverse possession. They just took it, and then they sold it to private developers on Maui. Those private developers took all this agricultural land, used the water only for the houses they build with these gentlemen's estates. It's all around us here on Kauai as well. So water issues in Lahaina and on Maui all over it are just ridiculous. I think 70% of all the water is in 2 private corporations.
70%?
70%. And like the golf courses have water, the hotels have water, but the people are on water restrictions. 90% of our streams are dry because they take the water out of it before it reaches the ocean and they use it for what they want. There's other giant agricultural companies that have come in, Monsanto, Mahi Pono, another one that's come over, a Hawaiian hedge fund. They've taken thousands of acres of land, and now they're taking the water that belongs in our streams, which is the life, the blood of our islands, and they're using it for their own monetary gain and for development. And so I cannot tell you how much that impacts the Hawaiians over here and impacts us. At the forefront of all of our issues, you will find water. And if you look into the atrocities that have unfolded around our water and how all the hotels have these fancy waterfalls, but everyone else is on restriction, our streams are dry, our natural creatures are all dying and disappearing, it's hard for me to talk about like what's going on with the water and the atrocities that come along with it. But it's at the forefront of a lot of areas right now, and it's in the public's eye, and hopefully there'll be some change coming to people really realizing that that water needs to be in the people's hands, not just these corporations. The people need to make decisions to make sure that water is in the stream and in the agricultural fields. And then if there's some for the hotels, that should play secondary and not first, because we're just under the thumb of the politics evolved around money with the water. Money is wealth to them as well, but not the same wealth it was to the Hawaiians. That ho'ovai and that ching ching are two totally different things, a totally different perception of what wealth is. So yeah, water issues run much heavier and deeper, and they're more serious issues than I could even touch base on in a few minutes here. But at the forefront of our struggle in Hawaii is our vai.
I'm trying to think in terms of a federal policy that would acknowledge water and the natural movement of water as being integral to the public goods the duty owes its citizens. And it's obvious, I think, to many of us that it ought to be part of the duty of care of government is to understand how water moves and understand the significance of water and understand the liability of what happens when you move water incorrectly through a land. And then also the lack of obviousness is, I think, what's very hard to digest for all of us as we watch this happen. And it hurts. It like actually physically hurts when you understand the absolute devastation it causes for life, the absolute devastation it causes for, every single person in every single daily experience. Driving that home as a priority has been so non-obvious in our current political system. And when I was interviewed by the New York Times as to why I was supporting Bobby, the first thing I mentioned was water.
Hudson River. Awesome.
Well, that was his work with Hudson, but I said to the journalist, I said, I don't know how we get to clean water in this political environment that we're in this duopoly of a Biden-Trump race. I don't know how we get to clean water. And, I was chatting with another journalist and she was like, it's kind of crazy what you're doing right now, just running for vice president with Bobby. And I looked at her and my response was, there's layers, right? On the layer of like the American political stage, yes, this is very crazy, right? It's pretty wild, a thing for me to do as a mother with a young child, as somebody who has worked with many, many politicians, but has never myself sought the fame of politics. I've always felt that I could work with many politicians and affect our country positively through working with the right people. But stepping into the ring, for me, actually doesn't feel very wild at all in this moment. Because of, if all I do is spend 4 years thinking about water policy, it is the most logical use of my time. There is nothing more logical. And so I hear about your choices in life and how you're fighting and how you're choosing to fight. And it's very, it's very logical. There's a real wisdom in it. Going back to Maui and what has felt like quite a bit of upward running into these walls as you try to find the right leadership and trying to get the word out. Who are the people that you've worked with that you have seen been able to progress positive change in Maui? I mean, feel free to name names or just talk about somebody, and how were they effective in your mind?
In all honesty, we're not effective yet on Maui. Unfortunately, our local government is pretty corrupt. For instance, where we know there's a water table right under the toxic dump site, there's testing for the new highway that's supposed to go in, and they know these streams are there, but they put the toxic dump site right on top of these underground streams. The developer that bought all the cane land, is in charge of all the water and controls it, doesn't have the money to take care of the infrastructure. So he wants to sell you water, but give you polluted water or dry the streams up or one thing or another. So we have not got a whole lot of positive traction in Hawaii yet. Now there's been some attention brought to it because of the fires and what's happened there, but we're still way down there on that scale. We haven't had a lot of positive movement in getting our water back. And like you say, it should be really obvious, and it actually hurts to talk about it because it's so obvious that it should be in some sort of a unanimous board of everybody working together to protect these resources, and it's still in the waterfalls of the hotels and the golf courses, and the streams are dry, and the taro farmers are without water in their traditional taro patches and the areas that they rely on this water. The people definitely deserve to have the rights and the connection and a say in where the water goes, and it's not really happening on Maui. So I'd love to paint a better picture and say we've been so successful fighting these battles, but I think we're only just now putting it up in people's view. Most people are not really paying attention. They're fairly ignorant to it. And so what needs to happen is that push to, hey, the water needs to be in our streams. The water needs to be serving the people, not the resorts, not these development for corporations that want to sell multi-million-dollar homes. It needs to be serving the farmers. It needs to be serving the households and the families and our environment. So I wish I had more folks that I was working with right now, or I could give some names of those. And there are a lot of people who are working diligently with it. I've been more on the farming side of things and trying to bring attention to it, but I don't feel like we've had a lot of leeway really being able to protect our water so far.
Yeah, interesting. There's a representative from Kentucky, Thomas Massey, who grows his own food, and he wants to put it into law that Americans have the right to grow and consume their own food and to sell food.
Right.
Which should be obvious. But it feels as if, due to so many of these mishandled policies around water, for example, mishandled policies around zoning, these perverse incentives that allow people to buy farmland and keep it as farmland but produce nothing, that it might be that we lose those rights because of lack of supporting the infrastructure that allows those rights to even be a reality for most Americans. It's interesting, Thomas Massey got into government because he was going to these county council meetings because he's a farmer, but he would be there with the other farmers, and the other farmers would all be coming together and what is the state doing? Why are you guys treating farmers like this? We're your most important citizens, in the sense of, we grow your food, we nourish your children, we sustain our community. And that outcry of farmers, not just, it seems like not just here in America, but across Europe right now, India, there is a larger issue at play right now that we have to start winning these battles somewhere in order for us to not let this be the end of humans producing food.
The small family farm.
Yeah.
The most important thing. Like if I were to say, people ask me, why do you do this, Eddy? I want to inspire grandma to grow her own apple tree to make her own apple pie again.
Yeah.
I want to inspire people to take their food back. And I've heard a story recently at a place in Michigan where there was a neighborhood and they're growing food in their neighborhood. They put them in jail for growing food in their yard. They started fining them $10,000 a month, $10,000 a month. I'll find some of that material and share it with you. And apparently it's all over in areas that aren't zoned agriculture. You're not allowed to have a garden instead of a lawn in your front yard. And that's just like, are you kidding me? I can't even imagine that. So like, how do we get farmers again if the small household doesn't start farming and doesn't learn how to grow a few vegetables in their yard? That's what hooks you. That's what inspires you and gives you the connection again to be a farmer. You're only recognized as a farmer if you have 100 hectares. So what happened to the small farmer? In 2019 for COVID, that area, we did 400,000 pounds of food on a quarter acre.
What?
On a quarter acre,
over
a year without a drop of fertilizer or pesticide.
Wow.
And we gave all that food to our community. And we made the land better by doing it. All the soil is more fertile by working in the cycles of regenerative agriculture. So rather than taking from the land, being able to give back to the land, we need farmers now. We need small farmers. We don't need giant corporations like Monsanto in charge of it. We need the small family farmer to take it back, and we need poster children of that. We need people inspiring their neighbor and saying, look, it's this easy. You can do that. That's what I'm trying to do on my little small scale in Hawaii here, and trying to show people up front and center, look, it can be this beautiful. It can be this productive.
Have you thought of running for office?
Have no interest in it whatsoever. Okay. I'm much more powerful in the way that I can set things up and the inspiration that I can give and the examples that I'd show. Only now I'm realizing that it's smart to be showing the politicians what we're doing, because they're gonna be the people that are gonna speak to the others and truly, wow, I tasted this mamey sapote that I didn't know was there, or this soil, I stuck my hands in it and it smelled good and it felt good to walk through this farm instead of something that's ugly and only worries about money. Like making our farms into gardens again, making our farms into forests again, and making our farms have a place where our children can play and we can play in the stream and maybe even put our cell phone down for a little while. Or use our cell phone and film it, inspire someone far off that they can do the same thing. I'm like pleading for the small farmer to come back. And I think that's really important for us to see. And we don't even have a chance of it unless politics change. And that becomes an important thing within politics.
Yeah, one of the comments I got from someone who attended my VP announcement was, I've never heard the word soil said so many times in politics.
Beautiful.
I was like, hell yeah.
Yeah, amazing, right?
It's the most important, it's one of the most important things politicians should be worrying about. And the fact that they're not, I think, is an indication of how far we've come as from what is core and necessary to the success of a nation. Healing. Let's talk about healing, because healing is a theme that is really important to a lot of people that are part of this movement. How do you think about healing?
So there's so many levels of healing that need to be done, because people are feeling spiritually isolated, they're feeling alone, they don't know what's under their feet, they don't have a connection or be able to speak the language of the earth. I think that healing is starting to speak the earth's language, one. I think that healing is about eating nutritious, nutrient-dense food, physical healing. I think that spiritual healing probably comes along with that same having a relationship to nature around you. And I would say that healing the soil, which is regenerative agriculture. I asked a 3-year-old the other day, 4-year-old in one of my classes, what does regenerative mean to you? And she said very eloquently, to start over.
Oh,
and I know, it almost makes me want to cry. And I was like, wow, that's it. We just need to like take a halt. We need to step back for a second, and we need to think about starting over. instead of like putting black plastic down, instead of spraying glyphosate, we need to think like, wow, we could pull some weeds and my little kid could be out there with me full of dirt and happy and healthy. We could not be afraid of having some dirt under our fingernails. That's healing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's so many levels of healing that we need right now. And now imagine a lot of the politicians, they were groomed as politicians. They didn't spend time out in the yard.
Except for Thomas Massey.
Oh, well, no, okay,
he
yeah,
wasn't,
so
he wasn't
amazing.
groomed to be a politician. It was actually his farming community that said, will you go run for
So
office?
I'm gonna vote for him. I don't even know who he is, but that's my kind of politician.
Yeah.
Because if we're disconnected and we try to put forward what our ideals are, and those aren't our ideals because we're not connected to that. So you're right, we need more farmers as politicians, not me. But I think there are a lot of really amazing people that are coming up with these things that are important. Yourself. You know what I mean? Like that you speak this language. Tickles me like I'm so stoked. That's why I'm here talking to you.
It's interesting because how I arrived to it wasn't necessarily a connection to nature. I was very much in the beast that is Silicon Valley, you know, spending 10 hours a day on my computer and hearing about the climate crisis as it was defined and hearing about weather episodes that were, you know, destroying huge amounts of land and killing, you know, hundreds of people every year. And I wanted to do something in climate. And I looked at all of every carbon drawdown, every geoengineering project available, for which there are hundreds. And my checklist of analysis was, you know, it has to be affordable. I looked at the carbon credit markets and cost per metric ton. Agriculture is around $20, $25 per metric ton drawdown. And then I compared it to the big machines, the carbon capture, direct capture machines, and they were like hundreds of dollars per metric ton. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. Why would anyone be investing in this? And then I looked at resource management, because ecosystems play a big part of climate management. And I looked at the resources as it related to actions taken by regenerative agriculture, and I looked at how those resources rebounded. Aquifers, for example, rebound. If you plant like prairie strips around a farm, it brings back wildlife. And then I looked at water quality, especially again in terms of runoff, and several other resource management related factors. The only, literally, I went through every possible climate and climate engineering project. The only one that made any sense financially and in terms of human health and planetary health was regenerative agriculture. So it was obvious to me 10 years ago, as someone who was actually very disconnected from the land at the time. I'm more connected now. But so, you know, I just took it as obvious, as something after deep analysis is truly actually the only thing that works for climate management. Nothing else really works long term, and certainly has, like cloud seeding, externalities that are devastating. So when I you know, get the chance to sit down with someone doing the work, I see you as someone who is incredibly attuned to all of the parts of this, and it's more than just an action of climate. It is the only thing that makes sense and should be our greatest priority of government, because it's the only thing that we can afford to do correctly. Everything else, if we attempt to do, we will fail. The numbers already show it. So then I ask myself, what the hell is going on? How is this not obvious to everybody else? Is it because they're just so good at representing these engineered solutions? Is it greed?
They didn't pay for it.
They didn't pay for it.
Attention.
They didn't pay attention. Oh.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, go on. I'm
But
asking.
I'm just saying, perhaps because,
Yeah.
and I'm not blaming it on people, but because we have to survive, there's the consumerism, there's keeping up with the Jones, there's like all these things. There's the cell phones, there's technology, all the things that we want, the things that were happening or surround us just went by without us paying any attention to it. So like, again, if we want to make that change, we got to start paying for it. And like, we've been getting paid by it for so long in the wrong way that if we start paying for it and we start teaching our children how to walk to the future that way and having them pay for it by paying attention to it, it's just that simple. It's like such a simple equation, it seems to me, and it should seem so obvious,
Yeah.
but it's like very disheartening that it's way easier not to pay attention to it. Most people, like just all of us running around, there's some sort of plastic in your clothing. People don't really think, I wash my clothes. What's happening with all that stuff that comes out of my washing machine? And they wonder how plastic microfibers are getting into the ocean. They use a plastic sponge. We sell loofah sponges at our farm, and we have people do dishes with them. And we're like, wow, it lasts way longer. It doesn't leave any plastic particles in it. And you can grow it and you can eat it. So like, if we can start to educate people that these things actually exist around them, then they'll start paying a little more attention to it. And I don't know, it's just kind of, I'm using a play on words with the pay attention to it, and I'm not trying to beat that down, but I think really that's what's missing, because we're in our little worlds of tunnel vision that it takes for us to, you know, like what a 2-bedroom house on Maui right now is $4,500. All of us who grew up here, we're getting priced out. Everybody's leaving and the wealthy are coming in. But if like the same people that are leaving said, oh, wow, let me pay attention. Let me get a piece of land. Let me start farming, growing my own food. I don't have to pay and buy food in the supermarkets anymore. So there's these little ways I think that can like educate us to like being a little more in tune with what's around us.
Yeah, and you would think that if we put like part of our multi-billion-dollar climate and energy budget into helping individuals buy farms, we'd all be so much better off with none of the externalities that mining for example, lithium causes.
Right.
Right? Yeah, that is the equation that, you know, we don't pay enough attention to, and we don't wait for the value that it actually provides. We underweight it. We consistently, at a federal policy level, underweight these very real measurable benefits.
Interesting.
And then what I think we also do is we underweight the liability of not doing it correctly. So we let that, this skyrocketing liability just build and build and build, which it sounds like you see it happening all over Maui.
And then hopelessness. Sorry, again, I don't mean to interrupt, but then it skyrockets, it starts to go down the hill, and then people come to me, Eddy, this land is decimated. It's gonna take me 20 years to fix it. Baloney. You do it right, it's gonna take you 3 years to fix it. And so like, again, that's like, we need more people stepping up, not being afraid of the hard work and paying for it and by attention and like being committed to it and saying, look, we can do this. And the more that happens, the more other people will see it and that snowball will start to roll down the hill.
Yeah. I mean, this is why I think you would make a great politician. I'm not trying to make a second pitch for it, but if you ever wanted to run, I would fully get behind you.
Right on, thanks. Yeah.
It's true wisdom. And unlike, you know, these short-sighted studies that we see about, you know, pathogens, which are very short-sighted, you know, you really do see things long-term and holistically, and you view, I think, healing and healthcare within the context of building health versus fighting pathogens.
Right, that's right.
Another example, you know, is I spend a lot of time trying to understand what's going on with women's fertility in the world. And what I've realized is my work in agriculture and my work in women's health has overlapped. And once you see the science come together, you can't unsee it. You have to do something about it. How would you talk about like what it means for new life and maternal health to be connected to the land and connected to the food?
I think there's just so many examples of that. Phytoestrogens, looking at drinking out of plastic containers, or running water through PVC pipes, or some of the chemicals that are left behind from glyphosate. There's just so many examples of how much women are basically, what is the word? Assaulted from every direction right now with so much pathogens. And I don't think everyone is super aware of it. From the things we put on our body, from the underarm deodorants, from the stuff you wash your clothes with, to what we're drinking our water or our milk out of. I mean, there's so many levels, I think, that are playing parts in this whole lack of fertility. If you look at our food, so for the last 80, 100 years, we've been growing most of our food with recycled bomb material, ammonium nitrate, potassium sulfate, and mimicking what nature does. And the science will tell you that you can grow food with chemicals. You can't grow soil with chemicals. You actually destroy it. What provides nutrient density is complex soil, micronutrients. It's not just NPK, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, which everybody looks at. It's all this myriad of things that we don't even begin to understand yet. Mycelium, different fungal material working together, the web of life, everything connected together. This creates nutrient-dense food. Nutrient-dense food creates healthy, thriving creatures, whether it's human, whatever. And I think our reproductive systems are so bound to what our environment is. And if we don't know what our environment is, we don't know our own body. We don't know that. So I'm not trying to speak for women, but I do think that on so many levels, fertility and some of the issues that are happening, you're hearing about breast cancer, uterine fibroids, 40% of all women nowadays, as the last statistics I looked at, are prevalent for uterine fibroids and whatnot. Some of that is directly related to plasticides and just some of the different chemicals that are around us and from even some of the clothes that we're wearing, we're realizing nowadays. So I think that, there's so many issues with that fertility and what's happening. And I personally would say, in my layman's view of it, that it is directly created to our environment and what's around us. And if we can have a perfect environment, nature is perfect if left to itself. It only goes out of balance when we interrupt it. So I think that the choices of what we eat, where we shop, it's a lot easier to buy broccoli that was grown in a field with ammonium nitrate for 50 cents a pound than it is to go to the little farmer and buy broccoli that was directly grown in the soil, that broccoli is going to nourish that health system. So I think that the fact that it's not that easy for a lot of people to have access to really healthy, whole nutrition, that's really, I think, a huge part of that.
And it's no surprise that the trends towards how we've treated our soil are now the trends we're seeing in how we treat our women who are wanting to become mothers. Right? There's this paper I read called The Chemicalization of American Agriculture, and it actually looks at all of these excess chemicals that came out of, military production, and they tried to figure out how to monetize them. And they said, well, let's see where we can monetize them. And it could be used as in agriculture to prevent pests from growing in the soil and attacking the produce. And then came GMOs, which were designed to be able to grow food in spite of these chemical inputs. And I look at what's happening in women's fertility, and I'm seeing similar chemicalization. And it's almost as if, if you look at IVF was created for women about to undergo cancer treatment. And it worked, and they said, well, let's provide this to healthy women so that healthy women can, freeze and bank their eggs. And, at the beginning of thinking through that, it sounds great. Just like, controlling our agricultural lands and controlling pests sounds great. But when you actually look at what that means over a generation of use, the results are not great. And so I just find it so fascinating that, agriculture is kind of showing us today what that mentality and thinking does to humanity. And we're now kind of the first generation of women being told to hyper-produce eggs, extract them, freeze them, cryopreserve them, have them laboratory inseminated, and then replanted, which is what IVF is.
Wow.
We're the first generation to really do this. And so, because that relationship exists, right, between human fertility and Earth's fertility, I worry that we are going to learn this very hard lesson in human fertility very soon. And it worries me. But to meet someone like you, to be able to have this conversation from at this place of deep understanding, gives me hope. I will say, it gives me so much hope. Because if you can take a fallow lot and bring back life, I know this country can do it. I know human health and wellness can do it. It's such a inspiring example of leadership. I wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you. I'm so humbled and appreciative of that. And like in the same thing to you and the journey you're on, if you can bring people back to these understandings and the importance of the wealth of what our Aina means to all of us, you know what I mean? Not just the Hawaiian culture, but and how that will preserve our future, healthier children, fertility, less cancer, less disease, more understanding, and like just a being with it.
And
so
abundance and wealth, as you
in
mentioned.
so many levels. But for you to take that to the front stage, for Mr. Kennedy along with that, to put that front and forward, that's been the problem. We haven't had that anywhere. We've had people that want to support war, that people want to support giant chemical, corporate. You know what I mean? All the lobbying, it's just ridiculous. So for the first time ever in my life, I'm looking like maybe there's a little chance for humanity and for the Aina with people that actually think that way, you know? And so, yeah, I'm humbled that you feel that way about me, and I'm glad that I can share that with you and that we can share it with others and hopefully inspire them.
I can't say I'm the best farmer in the world. I'm not going to lie. I conceptually understand it all, but when I go to do it on a regular basis, it's even something that takes, from me, a resetting and recognition that like, oh, I'm not prioritizing the soil today, or I'm not prioritizing my crops today. I just started using coffee grounds to keep some of the aphids off. But then I end up eating the coffee grounds from time to time. But anyways, that's TMI. Yeah. But I would love to just take your knowledge and some of it and just, I don't know, almost like
Well, you can hit me up anytime you want.
in.
I'm an open book. We document a lot of stuff.
Oh, good.
Trying to share a lot of stuff with people constantly.
Okay.
This is my time in life where I'm trying to give back.
Yeah.
I've been so abundant in my life through having this relationship, and I see the joy that it brings to people. I see that, like, I've seen actually people change their lives around. I've had people that are working with us on our farms and are eating different, and they've lost weight and they've gained muscle and they've like look healthier and stronger and have more depth to them and more understanding of like being conscious of their footstep here.
Yeah.
Like so many things that just come along with it. Could you grab me one of those little finger limes over there? I want to show you something else cool.
Okay.
Just here randomly.
Cool.
It's a sort of a natural sushi.
Oh.
It's a finger lime, and I didn't know if you knew about these yet or not as well. So I just
like
wanted
a
to.
tamarind?
No, it's like
No?
really cool. So instead of like, say you're vegetarian and you're having sushi, instead of having, in fact, I bet we could just break it. Instead of having the little fish eggs on it.
Oh, wow.
Now taste it. Don't get the seed, because that's what I got this for, is the seeds. But
Okay.
the little things are for you to eat there. You guys can all try some. If a seed comes out, just save it for me.
It's like grapefruit.
It's like grapefruit.
It's like little grapefruit.
How beautiful that is. You can put it on a plate. You guys can all help yourself with some of that. I'm gonna squeeze it on here so we can separate the seeds from it. Everywhere I go, I grab fruits and different things, so I can constantly
Collect
be
the seeds.
planting seeds. When I was a kid, people used to call me Johnny Appleseed.
Oh, really?
Because I was always grabbing seeds and planting them everywhere.
Wow.
And a story I heard when I was a kid, like, the 3 ways of life. First, there's survival. We want to survive, right? And then after you've been surviving for a while, there is, what do they say? There is acquiring. So you're like kind of acquiring the things that are going to make you. And in the older stages of your life, there's philanthropy. You try to give back. As a child, I realized that I could give wheelbarrows full of eggplants and things that I grew right off the bat. I didn't have to acquire anything. My giving was my survival, and I was able to be on the giving end of the stick by having this relationship to nature. So that's been like kind of a thing for me is like acquire more or desire less.
Fully integrated living. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool, right?
This tastes like it has a lot of vitamin C in it.
It does. It's basically,
super...
it's a lime, basically, like a pink lime.
Wow, thank you.
Anybody else can try that there, but I just thought that was kind of one more cool last thing to show you there.
Where can we find your videos and know-how? Is there a place online that we can send people to?
Yeah, I think we're out there on Instagram, Living Earth Systems, what you see on my shirt right here.
Okay, cool.
Living Earth Systems, and our website is livingearthsystems.com. But what we're really involved with now...
Support global warming.
Worming, not warming, right? So I have guys coming up to you all the time. They're, oh, warming? I'm all, no, worming. So it's kind of funny. I get both guys saying they like my shirt, whether they're a Trumper or whether they're a normal person.
Yeah.
Like, if they're a Trumper, they're like, yeah, great, got that. Forget that global warming. I'm like, oh, I'm like, worming, dude. And they're like, oh. So like I get both sides of that all the time. But what we're really involved with right now, and that's really important for us and to the recovery of Lahaina, we have a nonprofit. I think we've been rated as Forbes magazine as one of the #1 small nonprofits on the ground to give to. And you can find it at recenters.org. It's Regenerative Education Centers.
Recenters.org.
Right, and we are a 501c3. We don't take administrative fees. Everything that comes in through our office goes out to our community.
Nice.
And you can see a lot of what we're doing there on Living Earth Systems and check out where we're at. And so we've been giving away tiny homesteads and the knowledge to be self-sufficient, their own electric company, being able to grow their food. And so out of this devastating tragedy, we actually are really involved with supporting our community, and it's really helping bring this regenerative movement forward. Because when we give them a tiny homestead, we show them how to grow food this way.
Yeah.
And so now it's like changing their lives. And so that's like all the support that we get through there goes back to our community. So yeah, I think that's what we're at the forefront of right now.
I love it. I love it. That's a
Awesome.
good model for what government could be doing too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so, right? We should be trying to think that way, and how can we really like help without so much selfish need in between? I'm pretty disgusted by so many nonprofits that have $100,000 salaries, this, that, and a tiny little bit goes to anything. And these guys are all funding themselves, and half that money really doesn't get out there to anybody. So to have nonprofits that really look at it that way and want to get it directly to the people, that's what it's for.
Yep.
I've been working for 9 months for less than $4 an hour to support my community. And I'm not complaining. The smiles that I've seen, I cry twice a week for the people that I like am putting into houses. And there's such a gift out of being able to do that. I'm so lucky, and I'm so, I got to process all my trauma through being able to share with others. So yeah, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without the support of people. And America stepped up. Like people from all over the world.
That's so
I put out a
awesome.
cry that was like, hey, you've parasailed here, you've gotten married here, you've seen the beauty here.
Yeah.
Now come help us over here for a little bit.
Yeah, we healed you.
Right, and I also want to give my thanks
Yeah.
to all the folks who have reached out and helped us and shown such incredible support for us over here. Our government has failed us in major ways. Our local government has failed us in major ways. And so it's the support of people who love Hawaii, who've been here and experienced that aloha and felt that in their hearts that they want to share and give back to us. So yeah, I'm humbled and grateful for that. And I think that that's a great way to see what we're doing and be a part of it.